Welcome to episode 4 of Pope Snowflake, and the third and final segment of our look at Pius IX as the Grand High Snowflake in Chief. In part 1, we saw Pius sneak out of Rome following a civic uprising and refuse to grant any constitutional reforms to the citizens of the Papal States. In part 2, we examined his massive papal temper tantrum in the form of the Syllabus of Errors that caused other Catholic European governments to think twice. Picking up part 3, in 1869, Pius called the First Vatican Council to confirm his syllabus and reinforce the Church's stand against modernism. Out of the council emerged what remains one of the most contentious ideas, the doctrinal declaration of Papal Infallibility. Separation of church and state was becoming increasingly common, a battle against progress the Vatican was losing on all fronts, that was thoroughly demonstrated by the repeatedly futile condemnations issued by several of the popes over the previous decades since the American and French revolutions. As Demokopoulos observes in The Invention of Peter, papal pretensions are often, if not always, rooted in weakness and emerge not from positions of strength, but helpless rhetorical posturing. Protesting the loss of temporal power by asserting his papal spiritual infallibility, Pius was overcompensating once again for that inherent weakness with more Petrine primacy bluster. The Declaration of Infallibility met with resistance from within the Church and even by Catholic states. Many of the bishops and cardinals were against it, and history professor Brian Tierney points out that, counter to the Council's definition that infallibility had ancient roots in Christian history, it only goes back to the time of William of Ockham, more on him in a future video, and the Franciscans, who invented the concept to challenge Pope John XXII, who dared to reverse a decision by his predecessor in the early 1300s. Outside the Church, Austria, the longtime supporter of the Papal States, voted to nullify their concordat with the Church in response. As recently as the 1970s, Hans Küng, a Swiss priest and theologian, impudently pointed out how infallibility was divisive and controversial and was duly punished by the Church for his candor. Küng was a teaching colleague of the later Pope Benedict, and the young Ratzinger was involved in stripping Küng of his teaching credentials at Catholic institutions for making truthful and historical observations. Proving Küng's point, the doctrine of infallibility, along with claims of papal primacy, remain two key points of contention with the Eastern Orthodox Church that perpetuates the thousand-year schism. The other major historical result of the Declaration of Infallibility was that it gave France the perfect excuse to withdraw their troops from Rome. On July 18, 1870, the vote to declare the Pope infallible passed. A week later, France initiated the Franco-Prussian War, and 2 days after that recalled their troops from Italy on the pretext that the men were needed elsewhere. On September 20, 1870, Italian forces moved into Rome, encountering only face-saving token resistance from Vatican defenders. Despite Church claims of their God-given right to rule, the joyous Romans greeted the Italian soldiers as liberators. True to form, in November 1870, Pius issued another feeble encyclical noting that all his previous impotent threats had been thoroughly ignored, excommunicating, yet again, all who supported the Italian government. The Pope isolated himself within the boundaries of Vatican City, petulantly styling himself as a prisoner, even though the Italian government placed no restrictions on him or his movements and made overtures of independence. Known as the Law of Guarantees, the Italian government made offers to the Vatican that were concessions to European Catholics due to the history and tradition of church rule for centuries. The government made promises that the popes would have complete religious freedom and the state would do nothing to inhibit his spiritual importance, granted the Vatican sovereignty over various properties, guaranteed the Church's diplomatic freedoms with all the commensurate rights for the foreign emissaries, and even offered a generous annual monetary payment. However, the concessions to the Church angered many Italian secularists, as the Vatican was promised freedoms and political privileges no other religious institution held anywhere else in the world. The Church had abused and mismanaged the Papal States for centuries, and so it was a slap in the face to the secularists that it should be granted any rights. For 8 years after opting to confine himself to the Vatican, Pius refused to acknowledge the loss of his temporal power, believing that the divine will would be reasserted just as it had after his own exile in 1848 and with Pius VI and VII, who had been under the thumb of Napoleon. He went to his death in 1878, still refusing to acknowledge the new Italian paradigm, seeking refuge in his faith that the Papal States would be reconstituted by God. Once again, the cardinals needed to choose a successor from the factions that wanted to hold firm to the rejection of the modern world established by Pius, or to find a moderate willing to recognize the new realities. I'll leave you to wonder until our next video which option they chose. If you like my content, please like and subscribe to get notified of new videos. Please also consider supporting my work by becoming a Patreon sponsor. You can also find me on the following platforms.